In this lesson, I want to talk about how we can make our connection to our database. So that's going to be connecting our PHP code to our MySQL database. So over here, when we go to localhost phpMyAdmin, we can go in and we can see that I've already set up a test table and I have access to this test database. So one of the reasons that we use databases within coding, it gives us the ability to store a whole bunch of data and then also easily access all of that data. And we can see as we're clicking through here in phpMyAdmin, we've got these queries that are showing up. So we've got select all from, and then the database, the table that we're going to be selecting from. And this is one of the really cool things about phpMyAdmin is because we do see all of these queries output, and in turn we can take these same queries and place them in PHP and have that same ability to pull out all of this data from the query itself. Now MySQL is a relational database management system that uses structured query language, SQL, and it's free, open source. It's used for small and for large websites, and essentially it's one of the best ways to store data, and PHP works really well with MySQL. So you're going to see this combination often. It's very popular, and it's a great way to create that data storage capability for websites. And data storage is very essential for a lot of website designs, and some of the websites are completely database driven websites. So if you take something like WordPress, this is completely database driven. And as we can see, when we go over to php.net, we've got a whole bunch of default functions that are already available within PHP in order to access our databases. So works really well together, and MySQL, it's just going to use typical SQL language queries, so SQL language queries, and then these of course are the most popular. SQL is the most popular language for adding, accessing, and managing content within a database. So our first step is going to be to connect our PHP code to the database. So I already have a database set up, and we can also do this connection, and we can create tables as well using PHP code. So I'm going to show you that in upcoming lessons. So the first thing that I usually like to do is I like to create a completely separate file in order to do that connection. So you'll see this often that we're using a completely separate PHP file and then we're bringing it in to our main PHP files. And the reason that this is done is because we get a lot of reusability with our PHP code. So we can connect to it simply by calling into that connection at any time, and we don't always have to share all of our database connection information, and as well sometimes you'll see it taken a few steps further where we've got our passwords and our database connection information, and that logic is completely separated from the connection file as well. So we're going to set this up as a PHP file. So opening and closing PHP, and then of course any content within here, this is going to be PHP content. So first thing that I want to do is set up a variable in PHP, and you can call this whatever you like. So usually I like to call it con, because this is just my way of knowing that this variable I'm reserving for database connections within my websites. We're going to use MySQL I, which is improved SQL, and basically this is for PHP 5 and above, and it's an improvement over the MySQL queries or methods. So the method itself is going to be MySQL connect, and here is where we need to enter in some values. So the first value that we need to enter in is going to be the server name, and if you're using XAMPP such as I am, and actually it's very common that localhost is going to be the server name. So this is a common one, but again, this might differ depending on how you've structured and how your database connections are structured. So if you're using this as a hosting environment, you've got to look up what the server name is going to be. The next one is going to be the password that we're going to, or the account that we're going to use. So this is the username that we're using to access the database connection. And with XAMPP, it's going to be root. And of course, this would differ depending on what and how your setup is done. So if you're using something other than XAMPP, it's probably going to be something different. XAMPP as well has a blank password. So alongside root as the admin username, we need a password. And if you're using a web server in a hosting account, you're not going to have a blank password, or you shouldn't have a blank password. So this is just the case for this particular setup. And over here, the next one is going to be the actual database that I want to connect to. So I can go, and this is one that I've created, and I'm going to show you how to create a database as well within phpMyAdmin. So this is just going back to the server here and databases, and then we've got the ability to create a brand new database name. So most often you're only going to have one database per website. Sometimes you might have more than one, and so usually I'll just go into phpMyAdmin to make this creation. So if I want to create a brand new database, new temp or something like that, I'd simply do create, and then we have a brand new database called new temp. And then of course we need to create some tables in there, so we don't have any tables by default. And we can use this within PHP script, or we can have MySQL query in order to do that as well. So we could go over here and make a query for it, or we could use phpMyAdmin to create it. So I'm going to show you that in the upcoming lessons. So for now, this is the connection, and usually I like to include the or die. And the reason for that is if there's some kind of issue or error with the database, I want to output something if it doesn't connect properly. And so I just quickly saved this file as con.php, and I'm going to hide that sidebar because I've got the tabs here at the top that I can flip through the different pages. So the next thing that we want to do is just to make sure that so this is all we have to do to actually make our connection, and at this point we're actually connected to the database. So just with this one line of code, this initiates our database connection, and then within other files where I want to use it, I would simply do an include of that connection. So I'd do, and I would do something like include to bring in that connection information into the PHP file that I'm working with. And then of course, if I wanted to use it elsewhere, I would just include that con.php. And then that's all we have to do to initiate our connection. In the next lesson, I'm going to show you how to start adding in some tables and then actually accessing that table information and manipulating the data within the table. So that's all coming up in the next lessons.